Episode number 49, Jamie Nesbitt.
All right, cut to edge of stage. Great. All right, color frost.
Check. 1, 2, 3. Check.
Stand by, please. Heads to half, heads out, letting cues 1 through 10, down cues 1 through 10.
Welcome back to The Title Block, a podcast about Canadian theatre designers, their history, and their craft. I am, as usual, your host, Michael Kruse, and this time I have an interview with projection designer Jamie Nesbitt. Jamie and I met this summer at the Shaw Festival, where he was designing The Hound of the Baskervilles, and we had a great discussion on how he thinks projection should be incorporated into your design, and, I guess, into his design as well. And I must say, I saw 2 great productions last week that I thought did a great job of telling the story by incorporating projection into the design. The first was the new Rufus Wainwright opera Hadrian, directed by Peter Hinton and designed by Title Block veterans Michael Gianfrancesco, Bonnie Beecher, and Gillian Gallo, who did sets, lights, and costumes respectively, and Laurie Sean Bourgeois, who did projections. The other was Outside the March, a musical stage company's Dr. Silver by Annika and Britta Johnson, directed by Mitchell Cushman, and with projection designed by Nick Blay, or is it Blaze? I've never said that word out loud. Anahita Debony and Ken McKenzie, sound design by Richard Farron, and video design by Nick Bottomley. Now, Laurie Sean and Nick did something that is quickly becoming the standard in Canadian theatre. The video was seamless, integrated well into the drama, and did not ask the other elements to compromise in order to support it. It was supported dramaturgically and was inseparable from the other design elements. Just extraordinary. Now, we'll talk about these elements of design in this interview with Jamie Nesbitt. Now, Jamie and I had a conversation about a show that he saw and did not quite enjoy, as an illustration about the use of projections with live actors. Now, it goes without saying that this is an issue really of personal taste and was a discussion we felt was important enough to leave it on the show, even though it may sound a bit disparaging. Now, it was certainly not meant as a slight on the hard work and what sounds like quite a successful projection design by the creative team on the project, but it should be considered the start of a conversation about the use of projection design in theater. Enough said. Now, as well, we have a discussion about digital rights management. Now, something that neither of us are experts on. If you have thoughts about this topic and want to share it on this podcast, because it's a really important topic, especially in this age of such accessible elements available on the internet, I'd be happy to talk to you about it and share it with our listeners. This is an important topic, and we need to talk about it more. Now, I'm also very close to finalizing my trip out to Vancouver in December of 2018. I'm so excited. And I have confirmed interviews with Mary Kerr, Sue Benson, Michael Whitfield, oh my goodness, and many others, at least 7 or 8 others. This will be the first time I'm traveling outside of my local area to collect interviews for the show, and I'll need your help to make the trip a success. So please go to patreon.com and pledge your support for the show. You'll find a link in the show notes to direct to the page. Thanks to those on Patreon who already support the show. You're awesome. And now, my interview with Vancouver-based projection designer Jamie Nesbitt. Jamie Nesbitt has been a Vancouver-based projection designer for the past 15 years. He's focused primarily on live theatre performance and has worked across Canada and internationally. Jamie joins me at the design office here at the Shaw Festival in July 2018. Jamie, welcome to the Title Block.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. So, my understanding is that you started in theater not as a designer.
No.
How did you make that choice, and how did you start off?
Well, I was an actor when I was a kid. I was a theater nerd kid, and I was doing theater when I was, since I was like 11 or 12 years old, and trained as an actor at a film school. And then at that film school, I made some films of my own and kind of got on the other side of the camera and really enjoyed that. But then worked as an actor in Victoria for a while, and then decided that I wanted some more training as an actor. I didn't feel like I was really there yet. And then got into Studio 58 in Vancouver as an actor, and did acting for about 2 years there, and wasn't really enjoying myself. And at a certain point, through dialogue with the staff, at the faculty at Studio 58 thought it'd be a good idea for me to switch over into design. They thought like I had a career, and they thought they had a potential for a career in theater, and they thought I wasn't going to be acting. Which in turn they were right. And I had seen some shows in town that were starting to use projections quite extensively, in particular the Electric Company. And I thought, what about combining my love for film and theater together and doing this projection design thing? And Vancouver has been kind of the hotbed, I think, for kind of innovative theater for a long time. At least it was at the time. So there's a lot of people that were doing it then, and so a lot of inspiration was around. And Tim Matheson, who's a fantastic photographer and designer, he was one of the earliest projection designers in the country, and he was doing massive shows with slide projectors, like actual slide projectors. Mm-hmm. And he was a really great mentor for me and helped me get jobs early on. And so I switched over and started doing work right away. And there was a real need for projection designers at that time. There wasn't that many people doing it.
Well, what would just to give us a time frame of this? This was the late 90s, early 2000s.
No, I guess. Well, I started studio at 2003,
okay,
and then started working kind of in school. Like I was working professionally at school in 2005.
Right.
And we were doing shows with DVD players at the time.
Right. All right. So tell me about, just pick up the story again, when you started working with the Electric Company. Was that your first, you were assisting there with Tim? Like, was your first?
There was a couple of companies that I was working for. I got a artist in residency grant to work with Pi Theater, and I did a couple of shows with them, and they were really helpful in my career. And then my big show that I started working on was called Studies in Motion with Electric Company, and working under Robert Gardner, who is, I think, the lead design instructor at UBC currently. And he's a fantastic designer. He really pushed the boundaries of projection design, and he helped me a lot. And so his thesis was, he got a short grant and the thesis was to use video projectors as lights. And so he had great gear and great resources, and then a great show to work on, and which was Studies in Motion, written by Kevin Kerr. And so I got on that show early days, and was really hungry, and ended up being the assistant designer. I think was my title in that. And then I toured with the production as well, as it toured across the country. So that was my first big touring show, which has been touring and traveling has been a huge part of my life, and that was the first real big one that I did. And so that was and it was also great to be experimenting with projections, and have the time to do it too. Like it was, we weren't kind of under the gun of a tech period right away. We had weeks at UBC to learn the technology, and I learned a program called Isadora, which is now pretty ubiquitous in theater. So I kind of busted my chops really early days in a free kind of scenario, which was really nice.
And what about projection specifically attracted you? Like there's it's not, at the time there was a lot changing in theater, but traditionally the visual space is sort of controlled or conceptualized by a set designer, and maybe in collaboration with lighting designers and sound and everything else and costumes. But what about projections specifically attracted you to that profession?
I think it was the integration between all the video and all those and the physical world. There was magic there. It was surprising to suddenly have, we were at that time, large scale projection was just in a movie theater, right? So to have it become 3D in a real way was really exciting. And to have the integration between the physical space and also the actors, And so that was really exciting. There's a magic to it at that time and it's still there, but that's what really specifically drew me to it. I mean, I'm a theater person. Like I like live shows. And so to kind of enhance the live aspect of it was, it was enthralling. It was really exciting to be a part of that.
Great. And so did you, after you assisted on that show, did you start designing your own work? Like,
yeah,
you had done a little bit of that beforehand, but
yeah. So I had a residency at Pi Theater in Vancouver, and I did a couple shows for them on my own, and then I worked for Green Thumb Theater in Vancouver, and then I guess it must have been through Studies in Motion, but I don't know how I ended up working in Toronto. A few connections, and ended up working in Toronto, and there wasn't really a me in Toronto yet. So I was working with Cahoots and Can Stage and a bunch of those companies early days in my career. And so I just ended up working in Toronto a lot. But decided, I think I really had to make that decision. Like, do I want to move to Toronto? And because there is more work here. But I had a girlfriend who's now my wife, and I love Vancouver and love the life there, and so kind of chose to keep that as part of my life, and not do theater, like make a move just for theater. So I made the choice to stay in Vancouver for life as well. And then just toured and traveled for a long time, and still am.
And just before we leave, tell me about Studies in Motion. What was the end result? Like, what was the product, and how did you get? Like, can you describe the show to me? And I don't know it very well, so give us an idea of what ended up happening.
Studies in Motion was a very physical piece, and it was based on Edward Muybridge, who is known as one of the inventors of film, essentially. So he was one of the people that put a series of photographs together and spun it on a wheel and projected it. He was a projection artist, really, in a lot of ways too. And so Robert Gardner was using video projectors to light actors and dancers in very specific ways. And so he had a video projector on the grid pointed down, and then one from the front. And then as the show progressed, he added more and more video projectors and used side video projectors. His big thing was to, after the show, to get people to come on stage and look up, and there was hardly any lights up there, which was such a weird experience for people. And it was choreographed by Crystal Pite, who is, one of the best choreographers in the world. And so, and then Kim Collier directed it, who's a visionary Sminovich winner. And so the combination of, all them and Robert created this magical world of really specific lighting design through projectors. There was some scenography as well, using imagery, which is more kind of how I like to create. But and I think the experiment was largely successful. I think there's still some challenges to it, specifically around the color temperature. I never really felt like the warm scenes were successful because the color temperature of projectors is so cold, and the show largely was a cool kind of toned show, so it worked. But there was a couple scenes like in a garden where it looked nice, it looked pretty because Robert's such a great designer, but it really didn't capture the warmth of an outdoor space. Right. So it kind of failed a bit there, and that's just the failures. It wasn't based on any of the artists involved. It's purely just a technology thing, right? You just can't do it. Right. And that's a thing that I've struggled with. I mean, I saw a couple of Tim Matheson's slide projector shows, and they weren't bright, obviously, but there was a warmth to his designs that I've never been able to achieve in 15 years. And I don't know how, and we're all trained we're becoming more and more trained to or just comfortable with how the stories are told through video projections nowadays. But I still think that the audience doesn't know what they're missing. So it's just, I mean, I don't know how to get around that issue. Maybe someone smarter than I, like technologically, could answer that question, but it's definitely a struggle.
That's interesting. I mean, I think I find the difficulty I had with integrating projection through video was exactly this problem, right? You're trying to find a medium to match to everything, for everything to match, even if it's just as a static set piece. And I always find it difficult to sort of make warm choices in front of that and try to make them both be part of the same world, which is not a problem with the traditional tungsten sources, right? Even large pounding projectors and slide projectors, although slide projectors were never really good enough. Like, you can try your best, you can stack them and raster them and everything else, but still a challenge. But at least they matched, right, with that 3200K. Is there a way of? I want to take a little diversion technically, just because I feel like people have tried to put a CT filter in front of the projector to knock it down to 3200K. I mean, that kind of throws. I mean, how do you design for that? Like, you can't build media for that, because then you have to set your monitor at 3200K or whatever, right? Like, is that reasonable, or is that just not? Does that fail every time?
I've tried. I tried it early days. It was just so dim. That was the biggest issue. It was like we were already working with projectors that were inadequate to match lighting. So to throw a filter in front of things was like, I just can't. It's not worth it. Even though I did kind of lament the loss of warmth, and it was important to me, but I just couldn't bear to be. It's like, I've already chopped my legs off. I wasn't going to chop arms too. I had to. That's the thing with projections. Like, especially in the early days, I would create something on my monitor and it would look fantastic, and then I'd throw it up and it would look like shit. And so I ended up having to boost contrast huge and really bastardize what I had created. And so that's a big learning, and that still happens. Like, I think it's going to happen on this show that we're doing here at the Shaw Festival. I'm going to have to really boost contrast for various reasons. The technology that exists for a show will inform what I'm creating, and the conditions of the theater will inform the decisions that I make creatively. Like, for instance, we worked at I've done shows at Bard on the Beach in Vancouver in tents, and everything has to be high contrast. So the two shows that I've done there have been black and white, and that's just a condition that I set for myself, because there's just no other way to do it properly, with any sort of I'm interested in beauty and creating something beautiful, and I don't want to just create something and boost the contrast and have it just so it can read. I want it to be beautiful. So to have that knowledge prior and is important, so I can create with confidence that it's going to be somewhat look like what I intend it to look like.
It does strike me that like in that way, lighting is in the same spot. I mean, I can't create something. I can't make a drawing or do a rendering, or even in programs like WYSIWYG, or I'm not sure if Vectorworks does rendering. I imagine they do, but I would never think of doing lighting rendering in Vectorworks. They never, as close as an approximation you get, you're always going to have to recreate for the space. And you almost, if you've got experience, you figure out what works, and you can predict more easily what's going to happen in the space. But in that way, you really are just doing a sketch with your best possible guess back in the studio, and then when you get in the space, now you have to really adjust for live performance, right? Like, that's where the real creation kind of ends up, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's the biggest challenge in a lot of ways. It's the biggest challenge. It's just that time crunch, You learn so much when you see it on stage, and the Canadian theater model is is such, and especially in the indie world. And I mean, the model, it makes it seem like it's theaters is, it's theater's fault, but it's Canadian theater's fault. But it's not. It's just, it's a lot of it's a product of just money, obviously. Mm-hmm. But, regardless, you're still in there for a couple of days and you're scrambling just to try to get to function a lot of the times, just technically function, let alone adjust to the art and what the art needs and what the story needs. So yeah, that's a huge challenge.
Great. So how about other, what kind of tours were coming out of Vancouver? What were you working on in the, the mid 2000s that you feel are sort of endemic of your work? Like what?
Right. Well, I think what makes me unique, for lack of a better word, in as a designer is that I'm a theater. As a projection. What makes me unique as a projection designer specifically is that I'm a theater artist before I'm a projection video person. So I'm always thinking about theater. I'm thinking about actors. I mean, I trained as an actor. I love actors. I have a huge respect for what they do. So, I'm always trying to support what's happening on stage. I've seen a lot of incredible video artists come in and, kind of try to put their stamp and make a show, and it may look pretty, yet it seems kind of irrelevant to the story sometimes. So, I always approach it from a theatrical point of view and the story point of view, and so. And so I was doing, I did shows at Can Stage, Frost Nixon, and was one I did there. And I love working with sets. And, that show I was working with Patrick Clark, who's a fantastic set and costume designer. And, he gave me a great canvas to work on, 3-dimensional, all sorts of layers. And the show was, set in the 70s. And so the whole design came from that time. And that's another thing that I feel like is, I'm going on a bit of a tangent here, but it's really easy to access image, like through Google Images specifically. And I feel like, and I do too, like, don't get me wrong, I'm always on Google Images trying to find stuff, but I'm also looking in books and stuff. But a show should come from a period of time. It should be artful. I'm looking at specific artists when I'm doing a show, like, oh, this artist is interesting. Like, maybe this is like kind of the container, the visual container for the show. And as opposed to it being this kind of Google image smorgasbord of images. So, nothing frustrates me more when I go see a projection design and it's like realistic photograph, painting, animation, video clip, and maybe in isolation, all those moments are beautiful. Maybe they're even telling the story well, but they're not a unified whole. Right. And if you saw a set that was like that, you would be horrified. Like, what the hell is this? Like, why is there a donkey on stage and then there's a bunch of circus clowns? Or I don't know. Like I mean, I'm exaggerating, but the point I'm trying to make is that projection designers need to approach the work like any other designer. A set designer is going to do a ton of research. It's going to be specific to the period, to the show. Every single color, molding, wallpaper, texture, material, it's all part of the same whole. Right. And a lot of projection designs don't do that at all. Right. And it baffles my mind how that can happen. It doesn't baffle my mind. It's easy. It's easy to do that. Sure. And so I think and there's no art in that, in my opinion, so.
Do you think that that's because the problems that we're expecting projection to solve are very specific, and that people who are like the directors and playwrights perhaps, or maybe even the theater production team, is demanding things of projection designers that are not in the context of design. Like, we have to save money on this, or we'll do I can't realistically reproduce this on stage, so we'll get a projection designer to do it, rather than saying, how do we tell a story with projection?
Yeah, and that's the reason why someone would do that might not just be because of lack of imagination, and maybe just lack of money. There's there could be lots of reasons why projection is kind of called to save the day, but I think that's true to a lot of extent. You're, and that can be laziness too. I mean, it can be laziness. You're asked to do this fantastical thing in the script. Well, so video. I think it's because we live in a mediated world, and our fantasies are in image and video, so we think that way. Yet, that fantastical image could be with one light and one actor. It doesn't have to be with projections. I think sometimes we sell ourselves short as theater artists and think that it's not enough, like the actor and the words or the movement is enough. So we don't have confidence in that, and so we go to something big and huge, and often it fails because you need great equipment, and you need. I mean, video takes a lot of time. That's another aspect that we could talk about here. Is that creating a big fantastical animation sequence could take months just to create a minute of content. So, but it also could work by just throwing up one image, and it tells the story perfectly. So it really is moment specific.
Is it fair to say then that we shouldn't rely on projection to save the day? Like, is that a good rule? Like, you should be making that choice for another reason, right?
Totally. I'll sometimes challenge a director to ask, like, well, why am I doing this moment? This actor is just doing a great job. Like, why do we need to throw something on top of it? Yeah, but I think it isn't a financial thing a lot of the times. I'm seeing that more and more, where video is, where the set is just a screen and a projector, and it kind of saddens me a little bit, to be honest. I love working with sets and different textures and different angles. Where video becomes a surprising element, an integrated element, as opposed to here's the video, and we walk into theater and there's a screen and there's the image and here we go. I mean, those shows can be great. Don't get me wrong, because there's incredible stuff that's happening these days. It's just I love. Where else in the world do we get to come together? And to sit in a theater, and where we smell and touch and then we watch the physical world that we know outside be transformed before our very eyes. So I love when I get to work with a real set and integrate video in that way.
Yeah. I just as a side note, I just was in New York on the weekend and I saw Mean Girls on Broadway. Yeah. Which, quite frankly, was an incredible show in and of itself. Like, I was not prepared. I was prepared to be a bit of a theater snob and go, oh, please. But it moved me in many, many, many different ways. The production design, though, was literally the entire back wall of the set was a video wall, curved, sliding panels, but the entire backdrop was constant video. They had some three-dimensional elements that came out to sort of complete the picture, and in a couple different cases they did a great job of integrating. Like, it was all well thought out. Yeah, but it was literally a giant video wall that people acted in front of. All LED, so it could get really bright, and you didn't have to worry about. There was no other compromises made, right? And I guess if you're on Broadway with a multi-million-dollar production, you can afford that kind of thing for a several-year run. But that's it also was an area, it was also a play about social media and, you know, the way that we communicate in today's world, which is different. But it seems to me that there's a certain magic in integration, in having the three-dimensional world and the two-dimensional projection world and the three-dimensional kind of moving actor moving through time, all integrated, has a certain magic to it that is betrayed by the actor with the screen behind them.
Yeah. I think for me, that issue is solved by great collaboration. So I think you need to have a certain kind of humility to, you know, like, okay, well, maybe projections isn't the right thing for this moment, you know, and maybe lights is, or maybe it's a combination of lights and video, or, well, this costume is just so fantastic in telling the story in this way and so great. So I love getting in the room and hammering it out and ultimately trying to tell this moment for the story well, no matter who's taking the lead in that moment or not, right? So, I think, you know, if that projection, if that collaboration isn't there, and there isn't that kind of humility in the group, and then the kind of that group, there is not like we're serving this story quality to the collaboration, then you have a real competing of elements and actors and stuff it can be confusing. And, you know, that's not something that might not be incredibly apparent to an audience member, or even the designers, because it's kind of a subconscious thing potentially even that they're fighting, but they don't even know it. I think great collaboration from early days is super important in terms of integration, because integrating projection is a inherently challenging thing to do, right, especially when you're working in big space. Well, no, just generally. I mean, we're all programmed to consume image all the time. We're always looking for it. We're you know, our phones are always they're designing them to focus on to color and to moving things, and so that is magnified huge when, you know, sometimes I've done shows where the screen's like 100 feet wide, you know, so and then here you have this incredible actor who's trying to do you know, who could be, you know, I worked at a show at a Charlottetown Festival, and Jelena Kennedy was the lead performer, and we had this huge screen behind her, and it was really challenging not to upstage her. I mean, here's like one of the best performers in Canada, and, you know, from, you know, just by a glitch in my, you know, a technical glitch, I could just totally upstage her. So integration is super, super important when you're doing a projection design. Right. You know, and another example of that, this is kind of embarrassing, I have to admit, but I just did Rocky Horror at Stratford, and Michael Walton, who's the lighting designer there, a fantastic designer. We're good friends, and we have a really great collaboration. We said from early on, it's like, why don't we like decide our colors early? And we'd been inspired by the Arcade Fire concert, which had a lot of great, their most recent tour, which had a really great connection. The video and the lights had a really great connection through color. Right. It really worked together. Right. And so we thought, well, what about, like, let's try it early days. And it kind of more fell on me early days, because I'm creating video content early. Right. So I was like, each scene, we kind of agreed on a color palette. And Michael Gianfrancesco, who's a set designer, was also involved in that process and helping kind of choose what colors would work based on his set and just based on his incredible wealth of knowledge that he has as a designer, and instinct too. He's a really great designer. Anyway, so each scene that had like a color palette, and all the video content that I made was based on those colors. Right. And then he had those colors as well. And then and I mean, it's such a simple thing. Like usually, like I'm making choices about color all the time, but it's like we're figuring it out more in the space and in tech, and we're trying to fighting out like, oh, what color are you using here, and what color, and oh, maybe if we could try this. It's like, no, like let's start with a base coat of color, And that's what everyone says about the design from like a positive aspect is that it's really integrated. You don't know where set, video, or lights or costumes starts and begins. Yeah. And that's really because of making early choices on color. And it was such a revelation for me. I was like, I just knocking my head against the wall. Like, why didn't I work like this before, like really way earlier? Because it's just such a simple thing, but that's just the way I am. I overthink things and then finally come back to the simple choice in the end.
It seems like the end point of the beginning of the revolution for projection as integration in theater design, right? That seems like such an obvious thing. And why aren't people doing it? I want to, just before we go back to the sort of revolution of the digital revolution, which I want to talk about, and to finish this conversation, when should directors and creators choose to integrate projection into design? In traditional theater design, we know we're going to need a set designer. We're not going to need a costume designer. Those people are often the same person, but we know we need people to deal with those two aspects of design. And we need a lighting designer to sort of tie everything together. And then we need a sound designer, obviously to put things together. Although at some point, sound design was very much left to someone searching out sound effects, and then the technical, like that was sort of the later addition to the design team in many cases. But that was like the traditional thing. We know we're going to need these things. We all often in the past, only knew we were going to need a projection designer when it was called for in the script or when there was a specific problem we had to solve. When did we decide to add a projection designer to the team, and how do we make that decision?
Well, I think your example of Mean Girls is a good one. I think our world is a mediated world. And so the stories, modern stories, it's going to be pretty apparent, would be more apparent that, or just, there's just going to be more opportunities to use projections in modern stories. Phones, screens are everywhere. So I think that's a pretty good reason to use it. And then magic, I guess, there's a magical quality or a magical possibility in using projections. So that's often a time where I'm brought in, where it's like there's this magic moment that we want to make happen. Mm-hmm. And like I said earlier, I mean, it could be wrong, right, but often it's a great reason to use it, because I think because we're not used to. I mean, we are more and more now, but there's still that magical quality of seeing video used in a non-familiar way. Mm-hmm. So using it for magic is another reason. And then sometimes, I mean, there's really huge, like there's a lot of writers will write shows that have a lot of scenes and a lot of locations. So that I don't necessarily agree with the use of projections specifically to tell the story of locations, mm-hmm, but sometimes it's important. Mm-hmm. So, and then sometimes, montages, to tell what happened in between. Mm-hmm. And that's a script thing. Like sometimes the script requires that. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, there's lots of reasons why to use projections, but there's often, the problem that you're solving or with projections could be solved with another design element or with an actor or whatever. So, mm-hmm, it's not always true that projections should be parachuted in to, create a magic moment.
All right, so let's go back to the transition to digital design in theater. And back when I was working, projection was often the purview of the lighting designer to solve certain problems in the script. Location, texture, slide projectors were kind of the sort of base level in small theaters that we used. It's base level technology in small theater. In larger theaters, we use planning projectors, which are basically the same technology. It's just a larger source. And there was always a struggle with brightness. Then we transitioned into arc sources, which were always very often corrected to tungsten, which is, again, like we identified earlier, changes the, and then you lost your brightness that you were gaining from having, 1.2K or whatever HMI source. And then something happened. We have this in the early 2000s, we have technology being accessible for projection in theater. Can you tell me about what your relationship was to the previous technology and how you fit in, and describe what you saw as happening in the early 2000s with digital design?
Yeah, I don't often. I don't often. I try not to talk about being old. Sure. It's not something that's interesting to me to kind of put a label on that for myself. Yeah. Yet when I talk about the early days of my career, it makes me sound old inevitably. Sure. So I started on the heels of slide projectors just going out. I never did a slide projector show, but I did shows with DVD players, believe it or not. And I would, every new cue that I wanted to make, I had to burn a whole new disc. So I would, at the end of a tech process, I would have a stack of like 100 DVDs tall. It was such a waste. Yeah. And so there was, you can imagine there's tons of issues in creating shows with DVD players. Mm-hmm. But that was kind of just the way it was. And then I was working with an early version of Isadora at the time as well, which is a great program. And that Mark Cooley, I'm going to pronounce this wrong, but the creator, Mark of Isadora, did a great job on that program, and so we used that early days, and QLab early days. I'm more of an Isadora guy than I'm a QLab guy, to be honest. But yeah, it was DVDs, man. We one time we had 4 DVDs players stacked, because we had 4 projectors, and we had the way we found out how to do it was to have the operator with a remote at a certain distance away from the DVD players and pressing skip forward.
Oh my god!
Yeah, and it was consistent enough that we actually went with it for the show.
Right. That seems such a high risk. I remember there was a Volcano show that integrated video, probably in the mid 2000s. What was the name of the show? I can't remember. But they actually used a switcher, I think. They used a video switcher to go through, which seemed like, it was a good solution. It was a much more smoother solution. Yeah. But when you're using all hardware-driven replay, then that seems like that's what you have to do.
Yeah, the biggest problem with DVD players was that you had to stop at the end of a chapter. So the cues were chapters on the DVDs. So you couldn't have like a looping background. Like everything had to ultimately stop at the chapter mark in order for you to do a seamless skip from chapter 1 to chapter 2 or whatever it was. So yeah, sometimes we would use switchers. So we'd have 2 DVD players running through a switcher, and so that we could have nice fades in between things. So I use switchers as well.
Hi there. Yeah, I know this interview is going really well, but before you skip ahead, just shuffle over to the show notes, if you could, and click on the link to the Patreon page for the title block. It does cost money to produce this time capsule of theater design history, and for a couple of bucks an episode, you can ensure that I can continue to put out great interviews with designers like Jamie Nesbitt. Go to patreon.com/the title block podcast and donate now. Thank you for your help. One of the things I think that revolutionized video early on was this idea of a media server. Now, is Isadora, this is in sort of live, I used to work at Cast Lighting and work on WYSIWYG, and we dealt a lot with the live performance, the musical live performance, or live performance of music. I want to say rock and roll, but it's not rock and roll. And media servers became the way to, on the fly, make different choices, much like you're doing in lighting. Again, I'm not a projection designer. Isadora and QLab are more cue-based. They're cue-based discrete moments, and you can't really mix live on those, right? Or is that what my understanding is?
What do you mean by mix live?
Like choose at the last minute to add in this clip or to
totally.
Yeah.
Oh, no, you can totally do that.
Oh, you can?
Oh,
right.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so describe the sort of transition to that technology to me and how it changed your approach.
Yeah. I've worked with all sorts of programs. Stratford now has the top projection design software in the world, I would say. It's called a program called Photon. And so it's an interesting, I just used it for the first time a couple of months ago, and it was a really big moment for me to be able to work with that software. And it was a benchmark moment for me, things have changed quite a bit since DVD players. But another one of those benchmark moments was working with Isadora and QLab for the first time, and to be able to work in a workshop scenario was huge. So to be able to move an image on the fly from one area to another, whereas before I would have to burn a new DVD to move the square from stage left to stage right. Now, in the moment, I was moving an image around all over the place. I was distorting it. I was adding effects to it, and I could actually be a collaborator in the room. So that was a huge transformation. The clips had to be small, low res generally at the beginning. So there was issues with that. I was still having that head banging against the wall moment where I had created something cool on my computer and then had to bastardize it just so it would read on stage. But it was a huge thing to be able to be one of the collaborators and feel like I belonged here because I could keep up.
That's terrific. Awesome. So, any other kind of key moments in your career in the last 15 years you think are important to cover before we move on to sort of the more abstract? We've talked about a lot of abstract things, but I just don't want to leave anything behind as we move on.
Right.
Like things that you felt where you learned something important or...
Well, I think I have a great respect and love for... Not love. I don't love all technological people, but I have a great respect for what they do. I'm not one of them. I'm trying to challenge myself for my animation skills, my graphic design skills, and very early on, I knew that's where my interest lies. I want to create beautiful moments on stage. So my career has really been about growing as a artist from that perspective. And I think a lot of people shy away from doing projection because there's such a focus on technology. Mm-hmm. It's dominant. Mm-hmm. And I get intimidated by it too, because I'm just not like talking about zeros and ones and all the gear. Like I'm just not like, I know it well enough to do my job, but I'm not hungry to like get the next latest greatest thing. And I want to create beautiful moments on stage, and I want to learn about the history of art. I want to learn about this great graphic designer. I want to like soak up all these great animators. And so, I try to, when I hear a lot of young designers coming out and who are kind of intimidated by projections because there's this kind of cloud of technology over top of it. And don't get me wrong, it is part of it. But I think the projection design as a whole would be better served if there was more people who are approaching it from an art perspective. Often I'll show that like is really cool how they did stuff or whatever, but it doesn't, there's lacking in the beauty or something about it that for me and from my perspective, some of the best projection designs that I've seen, have a really nice combination of technology and beauty. And so, my career has really been about like learning up from more than learning from other projection designers. It's been learning from like set designers, learning from costume designers and their use of color and their use of pattern and their use of negative space and all these kinds of things that people don't talk about as much in projection. Like it's so much about the technology. So, my career has been marked by just, taking that next step as an artist, and I don't mean to demean the technology people who are really technology focused, because I need them, and I have huge respect for their brains and what they do, and they don't. A lot of those people don't want to approach it the way I want to approach it, and I respect that. And so I think there's room. There needs to be both there. There needs to be both those people there to, and sometimes that can be one person. And I guess I am that in a certain way, but I'm definitely more on the art side than I am on the technology side. So I think my career has been marked by just growth as an artist, and an animator, and a graphic designer more than anything else.
So let's now transition into your general approach. We've talked a lot on this program about how people approach design, and I think that everyone who has listened to more than a few episodes has gotten sort of general flavor of how to approach a design. There's research involved. There's discussions with the director. There's analysis of the script, etc. And there's a certain collaboration in the space that occurs with many, many designers. How do you start your process, and what do you think is important for you to remember when you're starting a projection design?
I mean, probably this is gonna be a familiar story, but maybe it's not familiar with projections. I just do a ton of research, and I get curious about different artists, different styles, painters, and I mean, this is from the design, like purely from the aesthetic point of view. Mm-hmm. I really do a ton of research, and then I'll also, and that research gets really specific, generally, to the point where maybe there's one artist that I'm drawing from as my kind of aesthetic inspiration for a show. I try to, every show that I do, to have a unique visual voice. Like it is unique to that show, because every show requires it. It needs to be unique. Like, you wouldn't expect every set design to create a similar set design. The great set designers are inspired by a show, and then it happens, and it becomes this unique visual thing. The same is true for my approach to projections, where I'm trying to find that nugget, like that artist really tells this story for me, like that makes sense for me, from this play and that artist. There's something, or this art period, or it could be more general, like black and white photography, or whatever it is. So every show, from show to show, every show I do it looks different, and it looks unique. So there's that aspect of it. And also, I really love being in the room early days. There's still this old theater tradition where the set designer and the director get together, and then eventually the set gets dropped on your lap. And I really don't like that approach. Sometimes, I understand why it happens. Sometimes there's like a director and a set designer who have a great collaboration, and that's the key kind of relationship. And I understand that, but I try to get in early as possible, so that just purely on a technical level, so that decisions are made that don't screw projections, or don't screw lighting, or whatever. That we're not going to be able to. There's not enough space. To get get RP. Get a rear projection screen in here, so we need to rethink that. Even just those basic kind of technical problems that can come up. But I'm trying to get in the room early. I love the magical what if. Like, what if we did this, and what if we did that, and sometimes it's not even projection idea that I'm coming up with. Sometimes it's a lighting idea, or it's a costume idea, or sometimes the costume designer is coming up with a projection idea. So I love. That's what's so great about what we do, is that we're still with people all the time. We're in a room, and there's nothing else, and there's just this play and this group of people, and we're trying to make something beautiful. And I love that. I love people. I love working with people. So my process is heavily influenced by the people that I'm working with.
Terrific. And it's encouraging, I think, that has been something that's very obvious in the last few years, that is generally the approach, I think, that's considered best practice in the industry now, where you're not just dealing with one designer 8 months in advance or 4 months in advance. You're actually getting a team together to have a conversation. Even though the economics of theater may dictate that certain people are only available during certain times, that certainly happens. But it sounds like that's best practice, and I think that's a good thing for people to take home. And as far as, I wanted to ask you a question. Back in the day, back when I was working, a lot of original video projection work involved bringing in video artists, people who were fine artists that worked in video in galleries and they would be brought in as collaborators. And video artists, because they come from a different tradition of, original auteur kind of creative work, they were bringing in their work into theater. And it often seemed like there were a lot of compromises in order to support their work.
I don't quite understand what you mean.
That you're an original creator and that your work involves this color palette and these forms and these shapes and this movement, and not. It sounds like you're from the school of the play is the prime mover, and I'm going to tell that story in any way possible, rather than I have an approach to visual. My visual environment that I want to create, and you have hired me to create that in your world. Right?
Yeah.
Does that happen still? That there are, collaborators outside of the theater from coming in to produce work, or do you find that's not the case anymore?
Yeah, it does happen for sure. It does happen. I saw a show where there was a scrim in front of the audience, in between the audience and the actors for the majority of the show. And on the scrim was various projections, and they had green screen elements. Like the whole stage was upstage of the scrim was green screened, and the actors were meticulously integrated into the projections. It looked fantastic. They did a really great job from a pure technology point of view, and art. Like just the video looked awesome. Right. I hated the show. Right. I felt like it was just because the actors were just hitting their marks, and they were acting great in the story. The play may have been great. I don't really know, to be honest, but there was no reason to see them on stage. Right. They were only there to serve this green screen idea that was then making this movie. Right. And it felt like a big fuck you to theater. Right. Obviously that wasn't the intention, but that's what it felt like as a patron to see the show. It was like, why the fuck is this a play? Yeah. Why isn't it just a movie? Mm-hmm. And so to me, that was a clear example. What I think that speaks to what you're saying. It was like someone who is a film person coming in and had this cool idea how to make a live movie, but they completely neglected the performers on stage. There was no, the live aspect of what we do was completely unimportant. Right. And so that was a clear example for me of just someone who doesn't really get theater and doesn't get what makes it great, and trying to make a play. And I really loathed it for that reason. Although there was clear artistry done. Like it wasn't like they're not artists; they're fucking incredible artists, and better than me, to be honest. But that it was so anti-theater, which I really struggled with.
One of the things that we've talked about a number of times in the show is that the design should look like it's lacking something until there's an actor on stage. When the actors are on stage, then it should be complete. So you're not trying to tell the story by yourself. Like this is a three-dimensional, temporal, live piece. It's not a proxy for film, right?
Oh, I love that. That's a really nice way of putting it. I think there's a, actors can be annoying and that whole thing. And there's like the division between the tech design and the actors. And yeah, it's funny, we all do it. But I think there's also kind of an underlying, there's a design tech people don't really understand what it takes to do what they're doing, and that it actually is really fucking hard. I mean, this isn't true for all designers and techs that they don't get actors. It's hard to make general statements in these things, but actors are completely vulnerable and exposed out there, and the ones that do it well, they're drawing on incredible technique and vulnerability and power, and we need to support them. We need to support the main storytellers of a traditional theater piece. And there's a kind of conflict between those two. And I mean, I know actors can be, full of anxiety, but I think just because I've done it and I've come kind of a failed actor, and so I just know how hard it is to do what they do. So I hope that that there is more that there can be more love between the two, because I think it's important. I think it helps. I think it helps the storytelling too, to trust that the actors have power and need to be supported. Not always, but largely they do.
Yeah, that's a great point. I know as a lighting designer, you are dependent. Like my work only looks good if the actor stands where they're supposed to stand, or I'm putting the light where they want to stand. You can't be in conflict about, when you come in, could you just go down right? Because that looks like you can't do that. They want to go down center or wherever they have to go because their next 3 moves depend on it. So, yeah, we have to work together. And I like that idea of supporting a primary storyteller. Like I think we should give that up to the performers on stage as being, they are the people who are leading us through this world, and we cannot be in conflict with that, right? Another collaborative experience in theater is certainly, in theater design, is certainly between projection and lighting. Before we have the advent of the professional projection designer, this very often fell on the lighting designer to sort of make up these elements. How do you work with the lighting designer to find a happy medium between the spill on the screen and integrating a screen into this like kind of chaotic lighting environment on stage? How do you mediate that relationship?
Yeah, in a lot of ways, it's the most important relationship that I have with any other artist on a show. Projection design is kind of the middle ground between set and lights. If you had to kind of place it somewhere. So a lot of it is the plot of the lighting designer, and where they place their lights. But this gets back to what I was saying earlier, that if the lighting designer and myself are not working with the set designer, maybe we can't put those side booms in between the legs because there's a big set piece there in the way, and now we have to light from the front, and there's tons of bounce, and it bounces on the screen or whatever. So, again, it gets back to collaboration. Thinking through all the permutations and problems that could arise from trying to tell a story point in a certain way, and and in the room it's challenging. It really is. Because often, still to this day, I'm asking the lighting designer to compromise their vision in the service of seeing the projection more. Right. And that's an uncomfortable thing to ask. So, the director needs to be able to say, okay, well, if there's a conflict, which will happen, the director ultimately needs to be like, well, we need to see the projections here, or I need to see this actor. I cannot see this actor. And then I have to say, well, okay, well, we're not going to see the video in this. Like there's no way else I can boost the contrast and boost the brightness. Like it is what it is. And so ultimately the director has to make that call. It doesn't always come to that. And hopefully, we try not to. It tries to be some sort of, often there's a creative solution there, but it's a challenging relationship. There's no denying it.
Has the technology helped Like back,
Oh, yeah.
like it used to be, but this idea of struggling with the brightness of projectors, like as projectors have become more higher detailed, higher contrast, like just the number of lumens coming out of a projector, that certainly has made our job easier, right?
Oh, most definitely.
Yeah.
Most definitely. I mean, I've had moments after 15 years where I've been asked to turn down the projections, you know, which is, I mean, soon that'll be a funny thing to say, but for me, that's been like, it's been fun to actually have someone say turn down the video. Yeah, it's the crucial element to great integration is that the technology is powerful enough to do the job.
And how about this? I mean, LED video walls are outside of the budget, I think, of most theater. At least small to medium-sized theater. The large commercial theater can probably avoid it. Are you missing out on that? Would you prefer to have that in place of an actual screen or a projection surface and a projector? Or I imagine they solve different problems, right?
They create different problems too.
Sure.
Yeah, you know, I think they're useful. I mean, speaking in general terms, I feel like they're useful and potentially in musicals where you have a big bright show. But I don't really like the quality of them. There's something about it that feels foreign to me. Maybe it may be a show that requires that quality of light, so it makes sense. But just throwing it into any old show, I'm not a huge fan of them. I've used them in outdoor scenarios before, and they're great for that, obviously. But it's just they're just so. I find them offensive, to be honest.
Yeah, they certainly do come from that. Like they have a certain place in.
They're for advertising.
Yeah.
That's
right.
what they're for. They're for advertising product. It's about the thing. Yeah. It's about the image. That's the story element, and so it just blasts over everything. Yeah. So I find them obnoxious.
My understanding is in a recent production in Toronto, they were running video walls in the show, and they were running them at like 3 or 4%.
Yeah,
like you never run them at full.
Right.
I was kind of just a side thing in New York. I was in Times Square, which is an unbelievable cacophony of visual assault.
Yeah,
and it was remarkable that all the video screens in Times Square are at full brightness in noon and look like there's no sun on them. Like they look just like I can't imagine having it inside I mean, obviously you're not choosing those products inside the theater, but it is a different thing. Just about your process, I wanted to maybe get, just for the students out there who are thinking about how you flow from idea to stage. What technology are you using? What programs? How do you move things between? Are you creating in Isadora? Are you creating in Photoshop or in, other Adobe products, Illustrator, whatever, to get to that point? Like, how do you move your work along?
Yeah, I recently taught a master class at the Banff Center this year, and I did some basics on how to blend and how to use Isadora and QLab and stuff. But ultimately, I mean, a big part of the course was learning Photoshop and learning After Effects, right. And I think those are more important in a lot of ways than learning the projection design software. I mean, you can, in a couple hours, you can learn how to go from one cue to another, a basic crossfade, right? Yeah. So that's not hard. Yeah. After Effects, and I mean, obviously, and then, Watch Out and all these other programs that I work with, there is a whole ocean of knowledge that's underneath it that you can get into, so you can do some really cool stuff. But, After Effects and Photoshop are crucial. Learn those programs, do it well, learn it well. Learn how to work with cameras in After Effects. Learn how to composite. Learn how to use Trapcode Particular. Learn all these things because it's going to make your show look great. I mean, I've seen a lot of designs where they'll use the video generators within Isadora or within QLab, and it looks like a screensaver, you know, and sometimes the show, that's what it needs, often not. Right. And it just looks phony and false to me generally. So, you know, and I think it just shows a lack of ability to, you know, to create work in Photoshop or in After Effects. So, you know, that's something that I often tell students when I'm teaching them, is like, learn these content creation programs and learn them well.
And that seems like it has to be a component. It shouldn't be an afterthought in theater training programs. Like if you're thinking about projection design, you probably have to start early, and you probably have to think about, much like life drawing is, a basis of, or figure drawing is a basis of, it's an essential basis of fine art. You have to learn how to get your ideas into a computer.
Yeah.
And it seems like that's an essential component of that kind of training. Like it's not something you should be learning on the side just to sort of try to figure it out because you're going to use it eventually. Like it's the core training, right?
Exactly. That's a great way of putting it. You know, it is the new drawing of projection design.
Exactly. Fantastic. All right. We talked about your approach. Do you have any kind of, have you noticed, you spoke about how every production looks different, which I think is kind of the hallmark of a designer who's focused on serving the play. Like, I think that is, and again, this is a theme that's in many other disciplines that's come up on the show, where you are trying to make the best design for that production. And therefore you're not putting your own ego kind of, on the show. Do you find yourself drawing from certain techniques or genres that reoccur because you feel like they work well on stage? And what are they? And
I find I go back to paintings a lot, like old paintings. Part of it is just like it's not I can steal it, to be honest. Like I don't have that uncomfortable moment of like, I'm not trying to steal someone's work. So that's part of it, but it's also, I think I'm drawn to the artistry of painters, and I tend to work with painters that are like totally realistic. So there's something about, I'm so impressed by what they've done with, their imagination and a paintbrush. And then to animate paintings has been really fun. I really love animating paintings. And a lot of reason to use paintings, why I use paintings, is because I'm working, a lot of shows were written 200 years ago or 100 years ago or whatever. And so that's like the dominant media form of the day. Right. So it makes sense that I'd be making those choices.
Right now, I think this is an opportunity for us to discuss maybe Hound of the Baskervilles. You are doing this at the Shaw Festival. How have you now integrated this idea of, like, how does this idea of using artwork that's contemporary to the period of the play, how have you integrated that into your design?
Yeah, what I was talking about with paintings applies here. And Arthur Grimshaw is a famous British painter who I've been really inspired by in this show. So he's the touchstone artist that I've been drawing from. And he's got this great sense of moody England, moody Victorian England, with, kind of sand and rust color, yellows and ambers and stuff like that. So, and then also just the trees are really great in his work, and the silhouettes and the shadows of the people, and the use of moonlight is really it really draws itself to creating it's a mystery show, right? So, he really made sense for the show. So I'm using him and other painters of the day, and then making them my own, and cutting them up and blending them, and adding animated trees and adding clouds, and then also there's some elements of Victorian collage. So there's a lot of great medical drawings and things that are so weird and creepy that I've been using as well in some elements. Animating those have been really, really fun. I think every show I do is like I get kind of obsessed and curious about stuff, and that makes the work easy. You know, often if it's a kind of it's just a selfish thing, right? To find something that I really like, and just so it makes it easier to do the work. You know, if I don't really know what it is or why I'm creating something, like it's so hard. And when there's that inspiration and those other artists there, and they're there to they're kind of my muses, and so they're there to help me create a show.
One of the hallmarks of lighting design is this idea, this temporal sense, and we really figure out those kind of movement between states in the space. And I imagine you're doing the same thing with Isadora. The animations themselves, are you changing how they move through time in real time in the space, or do you have to go away and fix something and come back? How are you able to sort of adjust that in the space as you figure out as the play moves?
Yeah, I could do animation in Isadora, but I could never do this design through Isadora. Sure. So so it's a slow process. So I'm working in After Effects, and some of my one cue could have 100 layers, literally. And so there's layers of fog and trees and smoke and people and clouds and different hills, and there's fog in between each hill, and so like in that kind of level of detail, it would just bog down Isadora, and you just couldn't, you just can't. So this show, I'm creating everything in After Effects, and all the animations are done in After Effects, and Isadora, which we're using here this year, is just a playback software, essentially.
And how long? So you it must take some time to render a new cue, eh? How long is your turnaround time? Like you think, oh, that has to slow down, that has to speed up, and we have to end, 3 seconds earlier. How long does it take to re-render a new cue?
Totally depends.
Yeah.
And it depends on this show is really a huge render hog, because it's this huge panoramic screen, kind of like a la Mean Girls that you're talking about earlier. It's this giant, and so the resolution of each of my cues is 4096 by 768. Right. So it's just a huge res every time, every cue. Right. So I'm actually quite concerned about it, that it's really going to slow us down, because I have 100 cues, and the projections is the set in a lot of ways. I mean, Dan Osborne's done this fantastic job of integrating. I mean, she's such a great designer, and she's doing costume and set, and she's done. We do have set elements. However, the set really is the it tells location more than anything else, and so it needs to be there, and it needs to be done right. So I'm concerned about it. I think we're going to actually bring in another a computer just for rendering. Yeah, because I think we could get into trouble. So rendering is an important concept to understand and to do tests prior to getting a theater. This cue is going to take X amount of time. So, and that's another little. I mean, this is a really very specific technique. To say for this podcast, but you can render out specific elements in your composition, what's called in After Effects. And if you have clouds that are animated, instead of rendering, I would render out the clouds layer, bring it back, and then re-render it re-render the clouds as a whole with all the other stuff, as opposed to rendering the clouds for the first time every time I render out that composition. So I'm trying to pre-render things. That's a really important thing, to save time in the end. Yeah. That's
incredible. So 2 things strike me about that. First of all, I have no idea how to get to that point. This is a completely foreign technology for me, right?
Yeah.
And it seems simpler than it really is now, right? You're not just playing back a found clip. You are creating minutes, maybe tens of minutes long sequences
Yeah.
that take time to do.
Yeah.
So how should we plan for that in, our production schedules and budgets? Like this is a real impact on what you do, right?
For sure. I do a lot of, whenever I work with a new director, I do a lot of educating, and if I get to tech and the director doesn't understand the concept of rendering, it's a big problem because there's a total mismatch of expectations. Right. So, when a director talks about, I have this idea to animate this thing and have this thing move, I'm like, well, okay, just so you know, that's going to take a long time to render. Right. I'm happy to do it for you, but know that it's going to take a lot of time. Mm-hmm. So, projection being the newest kind of design medium, and often I'm working with, I still work with directors who still haven't worked with video that much. Mm-hmm. So there is a lot, it's just an important thing to talk about so that the director knows what they can expect from me. Mm-hmm. So setting up reasonable expectations helps smooth out an intense tech period.
All right. So certainly a discussion you want to have with your projection designer before, well, you even engage them. Like you have to make sure that this is not, that somebody has thought about the time involved and the cost of being in it. Like if you have a 3-day production period, you're going to have to do everything beforehand, and there's not going to be any chance really to do any major changes.
That's
once
right.
you get in the space.
That's right.
Okay. I did want to talk about rights. So you use a lot of, when you're like digital rights management is something that has become increasingly an issue in theater, especially with sound design. In fact, what's funny, I attempted to record. There was a discussion about digital rights management in Toronto, and I don't make any money from these podcasts. I distribute them free. There's no real revenue source here. Thank you to those who support me on Patreon, but there's not a lot of you.
Support.
But I couldn't record the digital rights discussion because of a digital rights issue.
Right.
Right. But these are experts in digital rights.
Yeah.
So how do you manage that in video? Like, do you only use stuff that's in the public domain? If you're pulling issues off of Google Images, how do you, how much should we pay attention to the digital rights of those objects, and how do we manage that in a production?
Uncomfortable conversation. My shows are they're from my creation. Often, like the elements that go into creating an image that I see on stage, like wood paneling. Sure. I have wood paneling that I need to project onto the set. If you were a set designer, you would go buy some wood, and assemble it together. Okay. If I were to buy wood paneling, molding, all the molding that I'm using, the wallpaper, the whatever, like the industry of projection design in Canadian theater would fall on its face. Sure. I try to use everything in public domain as best as I can. And I never use I'll never use an artist's work, just project it, and without me doing something and changing and manipulating it considerably. So rarely would you see something on stage and be like, oh, that's from whatever. So, I'm sure there's flaws in my logic from a legal point of view. I'm guessing there would be flaws in it. But if there's I'm purchasing clips too. But there's a lot of free stuff on the internet too. There's a lot of free green screen material that I draw from a lot. But sometimes, but if I can't find something that's free, then I'll get the theater company to buy it. Yeah. So I think a lot of it is just, if you're know how to create your own work, it's not really an issue. Yeah. If that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like fair comment kind of laws cover you. Like you're taking the original work, you're altering it in a way that tells a new story. It's obviously not the original work.
Yeah,
you're probably okay. If you go beyond the public domain and
Yeah.
use something that's copyrighted.
I really try not to.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes they'll ask for it in a show. Like, there'll be, you need to see this clip of John F. Kennedy or whatever the hell it is. Like, we did a Frost Nixon show, and there was some stuff that needed to be purchased or I did a Vita once, and we wanted to play like clips from, the actual time period, and so we needed to go to Getty, and I mean that it was so expensive.
What do you think? Like, do you think it's a good idea? Like, given the discussion we've had about fees in the business and the work involved, do you think someone should become a projection designer? Do you think that that's a good idea for people to go into theater generally in design? Or, what would you say to someone who's considering this as a career?
Well, first I'll speak to, you spoke earlier about how, lighting design skills are transferable into the corporate world, and projection falls into that. Like, I've been able to do some corporate work. I probably could get into movies and stuff too with my skills that I have. It's not what I want to do right now, but I could. So there is, or an advertising firm or whatever like that. So there is crossover. Mm-hmm. So I think it really, and I think that it's going to. I just lost a corporate gig to a bunch of Romanian designer, After Effects, Photoshop people, because they undercut me by, I think I said it was going to take $4,000 to do this one thing, and they did it for $500. Oh, so I think there's going to be issues that are going to come up there because it's a global industry. Mm-hmm. But in theory, there's a lot of crossover. So the skills that you're going to learn, you can apply in different areas. Mm-hmm. I feel blessed and fortunate and privileged to do what I do. Mm-hmm. Me being here is not just a product of my passion and my love. It's a product of growing up as a privileged person in Calgary, and I don't have any debt. I didn't have any debt coming out of school. I was able to invest in equipment early on because there's that you need to buy a computer, and and I was able to do that and not lose my shirt. Mm-hmm. So I think that needs to be a part of my encouragement is to kind of admit the story of me and that got me here. However, all that being said, just to speak in cliches, I love what I do. I love the people. The theater people are the best. There's a I hear about other people's jobs and how boring they are. Like, I'm never bored. And I know there's other life stuff and the financial struggle is real, but ultimately, like, I come to work with people that I adore. Generally, every day I fight and I get excited and I get curious and I get inspired. And I feel blessed to be able to do that. Almost every day of my life, I have that. So, when I was an actor at Studio 58, they're like, if there's other things that you want to do or that you think could do it. But if you want to be a theater artist and that's all you can imagine being a theater artist, I would never discourage someone from doing it. And that's me, man. I love theater. And I love other things in life, but I've done theater since I was 12. It's what I know. So yeah, do it. The struggle's real, but it's really rewarding.
Well, I think we'll leave it there. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great to be on.
That was projection designer Jamie Nesbitt talking to me from Niagara-on-the-Lake in June of 2018. Next time, an interview with set and costume designer Dana Osborne. The music for this podcast is by Vern Good with voiceover by Gabriel Cropley. Please go to Apple Podcasts and give us a review. It'll help get the word out about this podcast and share the history of theater design in Canada. And you can follow us on Twitter at TheTitleBlockCA and on Facebook.com/TheTitleBlock Podcast. You can send comments and requests by email to TheTitleBlock@gmail.com. And don't forget that if you like the show, please support us on patreon.com. Feel free to share this with your friends, colleagues, students, and teachers, or listen to it while you try to figure out how much you have to change that art you found on the internet so no one will notice when you put it in your show. Does anyone know? I'm Michael Kruse, and I'll see you next time on The Title Block.